Sometimes heroes do wear capes. Not me, though. Lazarus! Welcome back again, my friends. This time we're talking about capes, the clothes that we wear over our power clothes. It's how they know that we are all dark angels. Lazarus gives me the opportunity to cover the color progressions and light perspectives on 3 different flowing areas. We're going to talk about his tarp, his cape, and the inner fringes. So, without any further ado, put on your sunglasses, wet your brushes, let's get into it.
In the beginning.
Picking back up on old Sergeant Lazarus, let's start singling some of these areas out and finishing them off. First, I want to talk about that red. On the palette, Cotto red base, Vallejo deck tan, and black. We'll be mixing the black and the red together. This will form our main color, and as a highlight, bringing larger amounts of deck tan into play so I produce a more desaturated red, more characteristic of the Dark Angels versus the vibrant reds of the other Marine chapters. Sure. So we'll make a few mixtures and start bringing it up very gradually. Thin amounts of paint, all moving in the same direction. Grab a little bit of water and a little more paint. Add another layer. Clean my brush out. Use it like a bit of a sponge. Pick up this edge right here so the blend becomes smooth. It'll take a few passes to get a nice foundation built up. And then we'll be highlighting in very small portions. While this dries, I can pick out the rope going around his waist. And while this is drying, I can pick out the rope going around his waist, the handle of his ceremonial dagger. Just give everything that's red a little touch. And adding another layer to the cape. Mostly I want the shadow and midtones showing, allowing a lot of these deeper colors to come through. Let's let a little bit more black in with our red. Sweep this into the shadows. Pulling it almost up to the top, just kind of enveloping the blend. Excellent. Also take some of that diluted black, define these red ropes and such. A little bit deeper. Alright, let's move up a shade. Start getting into more of this pinkish tone. Start by adding very small amounts. So just bring it out on the corner of the cape. And just slight edge highlight running around the bottom. And I want to repeat that right down here. Probably don't need to even... we'll add a small highlight right in here. We just won't layer this up as intensely. I might just leave it like this as this one coat to dry. It'll desaturate, dim down a little bit as it dries, but we'll make sure that more visible area is nice and saturated, looking clean and perfect. And we're gradually going to build up the highlight inside of his eyes. A little digital readout on his wrist. We'll use the same progression just to save a little bit of time. Alright, back onto that show-stopping corner of the cape. Blend that up gently. You can see the highlight on the inner flap now that it's dulled itself down a little bit. Let's jump down a step. I'm just going to layer some slightly deeper red back over it. Yeah, a little more subtle that way. And one more pass on the corner of this cape. We'll go even further into the brightness. Even more deck tan. This will just be a slight edge highlight. Hit that a couple times. Bring up these lenses to the brightest pink. Just the slightest touch. It's such a compact area that it may only appear to be blended. Don't have to work quite as hard to get a gradient going. Let's jump down to this deeper red side of things. Just push that back into the corners of the lenses, kind of sweeping over most of that progression, leaving that brightest pink bare, everything else being blended upon. And we'll give it one more shot. Alright, digging the cape, but just very, very diluted. I want to add a little bit of mid-tone. Feel it's kind of lost, not quite as saturated as I would like it to be, and red is a tricky color. To sum it up quickly, it's just a little bit more difficult to blend and work with red because of the recipe to create the color red. This runs across all brands and many different mediums. So it may look bright and vibrant. We'll go back, just add a few safety layers, make sure everything dries with that same level of punch. Alright, not too bad. Let that finish drying and move on to another step. Moving along from those red robes, we're going to switch over and work on the ivory side of things. So first I'm going to take some Vallejo buff, add a little bit of white to it, and pick out some edges. I want this robe to look a little tattered, so I'll be lifting and dropping the brush along these edge highlights, just adding a little bit of extra texture. In a few areas I'll blend up a highlight, but mainly I want to get this near brightest color locked in. Where I had left off last time, it had just been wet blended, so I want to tune things up a little bit. Certain areas, he has a lot of detail, a lot of things sitting on top of his cloak, so the step won't take long. But you can see these two areas I'm working with right now, just blending a little highlight up in place, working around the rope across his waist. Need to give those folds of fabric a little bit of attention. Alright, we'll let that dry. Pick out some other areas. Okay, now I'll switch over to the darker side of things. I'm going to take a little bit of black, a little bit of thornwood green, mix them together, just making a darker shadow version of the thornwood green. And we'll work some of these shadows. It's very diluted. I'm glazing into the shadows of the wash-like consistency. Just remember to have a controllable amount of your dilution on your brush. But I really want to bring more shadow into play on this robe. It's a little on the lighter side, and just going for that kind of dark and brooding atmosphere. Need to bring out more of these dark and brooding shadows. On this underside, we'll go to near black. Going for that high drama. 40K is all about the drama. I'm also going to go in at this point with my nearly entirely black with just a touch of thornwood green mixture. And dark line around all these objects sitting on top of the cloak. Pick out the chain, the rope, his one special feather. I think the feather grants you a raccoon suit. I'll have to reread my codex. Alright, now just a little bit of, we'll try the thornwood green, a touch of guncore brown. Pull these folds back out. Just controlling the brightness. Generally, I want more light to be present on the upper areas of the model, the bust and the shoulders. So by controlling the level of brightness that I highlight these lower areas up to, I'll get a nice dramatic lighting effect. And we can smooth out a little bit of that transition, may be slightly abrupt. So take this chance now to clean up any mid-tone areas. Just go hunting for some mistakes, some false blends. I want to highlight this flap on the lower portion, but not at the same brightness. And I'll touch the side of his chest. Alright, not bad. Let's bring that ivory, that Vallejo buff and white mixture back into play. Just another round of highlights. Keep these ones just in the upper areas. The slightest amount where his cloak is tipping out here. Might be breaking my own rules slightly, but I can't resist just adding a little highlight to these more pronounced angles. And just a textured highlight right up here where it's running back over his chest. And let's bring that right through here, accent this kind of gentle bend in his robe. Alright, mess around a little bit in there. Just grabbing some of my guncore brown. I like it. Let's bring a little bit more of that stippling and texture to some of our other areas. I like how that came out, so I want to make sure that it's visible in some other areas. Excellent. Let's go up to the pure white. Just the slightest bit of the touch. Use this very selectively. Just keep it contained to the upper portions of his body. Body yaddy yaddy. This little crest here. And right across the top. Happy with these purity seals. Just give them a little touch as well. Call that good. Well, I suppose it does need a little bit of nondescript scrawling upon it. Switch down to a smaller brush. Touch of black and thornwood green. Again, going for that near black mixture. Take a good amount of this off of my brush. Very lightly. Lifting and dropping, adding small upward slashes and downward slashes just to make it look like written script. I'm gonna highlight this hip area just a little bit more. All right. Groovy. And just a slight highlight here with the guncore brown. Touch of buff involved. Alright. I'm liking this. Call that good for now and set up for the next step. Moving on to the back side. Let's work up this gray cape. Let's be using some Vallejo black, a little bit of deck tan. Combining these to make a few shades of gray. And with the three of those, let's start off the wet blending. So grab pure black, move that into our medium gray, right where the cape is falling inward. Then we'll move back to our black. It's working in very thin glaze-like consistencies. Back up to our medium gray. I'll have to let that sit and dry. Work up these other areas. Alright, and as the other areas are drying, I'll just repeat that process. So again, laying my medium gray right down the middle of this crevice. Then I'll take my black, just wet blend it together. And now it's starting to stick. Gradient is becoming a little more obvious. Remember, you can always move back and forth between your colors. Add more of whichever ingredient is missing. And we'll keep working away. Blend this through one more time. Now with just pure black, do a little bit of layering. I want this to still read as a black cape, so to blend a little bit of the darkness back into play. Alrighty, let's use a little bit of studio magic and make this instantly dry. Not too bad. Let me give it one more pass with the black shadow. With that dry or drying, move up to my brighter deck tan, bring in a little bit of edge highlighting. Be careful, I don't have too much paint on my brush. Make my edge highlights very wide. Just want to accent the bends where the cape is flowing out, dipping in, wherever these channels of light run a little bit brighter. That's where I will drop my edge highlights. And I want to brighten things up ever so slightly on all those arcs on the cape. And it's just very thin, almost dirty paint water-like consistency. Once again, just adding a little bit of brightness. Alright, I'm liking it. Just a little bit more balancing to do. A little more of the darkness. The ever-consuming blackness. Just bringing that a little bit further. Working back and forth with my lighter grays and this very thinned down deep black. Deep black. It's black. Alright, just one more small touch of the brightness. Always do things according to taste. Do it harder, do it softer, do it more, do it less. Just about there. I want to add one more touch of lighter gray, just very softly bringing bit of a shining line onto these peaks of the creases and into the deeper grooves on the cloak. Just right in there. It's thinned down so it'll come out nice and soft. I could really go back and forth on this many times. I keep thinking that I'm done, and I can keep adding more layers and making it smoother. But that would be boring, so let's move on. One more thing. One more thing. Regarding the cape and a recent photograph I took of my work in progress, I see the opportunity to add a very stylish drop shadow. So, with a touch of black, Cawdor red, like a very, very deep red. Using that picture as my guide, let's just drop a shadow in, softly following the curvature of the cape. Just like that. You don't even really notice it, and that's the fun thing about drop shadows. Until you've trained your eye to see these things, you may just think it's natural lighting. Not bad. Let me just draw this out a little bit further, get a little more pronounced. And it's the same color as what the cape was softly shaded with, so there's a certain kind of dividing line where it breaks from hard shadow to being blended again. I'm all right with that. Let us dance upon the razor's edge. And bring up his secondary, less important sidekick, the second shadow. One more step, maybe the last. We'll see how this comes out. Very small amount of red ink, specifically from FW, Dialer Rowney style, crimson. Let's take the smallest amount of that ink and a much larger amount of water. So I just have this thin candy coating glaze. I'll just smooth this out over the entire cape. Let it filter things together. Don't use too much ink or it will turn glossy, but just this very small, fine amount. It's transparent enough where it doesn't really affect most of the blends. I left the upper area out of it. We'll let that dry up and have a look. Beautiful. They say the women always dug his gallant stroll as Lazarus was seen flapping in the distance. I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to ask any questions, comments below. I'll have a list of colors for you as well. And next time we see Lazarus, we're going to have a bit of a face off. So remember, when you go out into that world, you strap on a happy face and smile even though your heart is breaking. The only reason your heart is broken is because your models are unpainted, so get after it.